Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
I guess I've always kind of known that I had a fiery streak, but realised that I had an issue probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
I wonder how many sort of men in particular are out there with those same thoughts and feelings, but haven't had that sort of check, that moment where they suddenly go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe there's something that's going on here.
We tend to just kind of blaze from one moment to the next without really self-reflecting. And I think I did a lot of that when I was younger. And I kind of saw myself as like someone who wouldn't take any crap from anyone else.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
Yeah, we're at home of the UK's conversation about mental health. It's Mental Health Monday. My name's Mick Coyle. Thanks for checking us out this week, and we've had a really, really great week at Mental Health Monday. My wife and I were lucky enough to be at the Soho Theatre Wednesday over this week for the Liverpool City Region Culture and Creativity Awards. Brilliant news. Nominated as a finalist in the Health and Wellbeing category, which is about using culture and creativity through the podcast and the work we do here at Mental Health Monday to bring important matters to the fore. And we did that in particular with our Iron Men special from way back in September ahead of World Suicide Prevention Day, bringing together guys who'd been at suicidal moments and decided to come back from that point to choose hope and to choose life. At the same time, we linked it in with the Iron Men statues, those sort of still and stoic statues that stare out to sea. And we said that the real Iron Men were those who now talk about the emotions, talk about their feelings, and express themselves in a way which is a credit to them and goes a long way to tackle so many of the stigmas around things like suicide. So brilliant to be nominated, brilliant to be named as a finalist. Back on with this week's podcast, though, and episode 241. And we're actually heading back out to the stage for this week's conversation, and a show which had a highly successful run at the Everyman Theatre in Liverpool in June 2021, and it's also heading out to the Old Electric in Blackpool, UCLAN in Preston, the Dukes in Lancaster, before heading down to London for the tour beginning at the Art Depot, the Northern Stage at Newcastle, before heading to the Soho Theatre in London for an entire week. The show is called YAMAM. Now, YAMAM is short for Young Man's Angry Movements, and it's performed by a guy you might know from Hollyoaks, but he's a writer in his own right and has put together this critically acclaimed one-man show. Now, to give him his full title, Majid Luke Mehdizadeh Jerdy, and on stage he's known as Luke Jerdy from a performance point of view. Now, this show is looking at the issues around anger, and it's brutally honest. It's an autobiographical show as well, tracing the origin of Majid's own personal struggles with anger, and then talking about the unspoken things like anxieties, desires, and fantasies of male anger. And he's asking the question, will you join him in a journey to a new manhood as he battles an invisible hierarchy that exists among men? How does that both affect men and the lives of those around them? It's a fascinating conversation, and anger, an absolutely crucial emotion, channeled in the wrong way can be really, really disruptive. But what are the alternatives? What are the other options? Really fascinating conversation to have. So let's have the conversation right here on Mental Health Monday. That's exactly what it's all about. Majid Luke Mehdizadeh Jerdy is his name, and he joined us on the programme to talk about his show, how you can get involved. I'll put details in the podcast write-up as well, so you can find out more about the performances and where you can check them out near you. There's also going to be some workshop works that we'll talk about, engagement workshops that are involved in this too. We'll touch on that as part of the conversation. But we start off by talking about anger as an issue, and when did he become aware that it was an issue for him?
That's a great question. Thanks for having me on, Mick. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I've always been aware of it, but I mean, I say it in the show quite a lot. Is that, and I think it applies to when we're younger. Is that we tend to just kind of blaze from one moment to the next without really self-reflecting. And I think I did a lot of that when I was younger, and I kind of saw myself as like someone who wouldn't take any crap from anyone else. So it's like, well, I'm going to always stand up for myself, and if you wind me up, I'm going to have a go back at you, or if I strongly disagree with you, we're going to have a fierce debate about that, whether that be politics, which I found for a while was a great way to let my anger out in a fairly safe way, because it's like I'm masking the anger with passion for political issues, which I actually absolutely felt the passion for those political issues at the time, but I'd almost kind of go out after reading something or hearing something, and I'd kind of think, well, I'm going to have an argument with someone today. If somebody mentions Brexit, for instance, I'm going to come down on them today, and then it would lead to this like just kind of toxic arguments, which almost ended in like either me threatening somebody or somebody threatening me. And I guess I've always kind of known that I had a fiery streak, but realised that I had an issue probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, I'm 32 now. I've been with my fiance for 6 years, and I think probably about a year into our relationship was when I fully kind of recognised the problem and was like, I need to sort this out. So I would guess that came about 4 or 5 years ago.
As a legitimate response to circumstances, you might put anger up there with something like, fear or adoration, happiness, even maybe. But at what point were you becoming aware that anger was a problem, that it was taking you to potentially, problematic places?
Well, I think it all kind of came to a head with something that happened. There was a charity ball for my fiance's cousin, who had an accident while he was playing rugby a few years ago, and there was a kind of charity ball to raise money for wheelchair rugby equipment and things like that. Really amazing occasion, which had been set up by friends of his. So all the family were there, loads of friends. There was an auction, and I got quite drunk, and there was like a bit of a commotion outside, and Daisy, my fiance, had like just fallen over, just drunk and just fallen over, and I got it in my head that someone had pushed her. So I basically started a fight. Thankfully, it didn't get physical, but started a fight. Ended up having a go at one of the organisers of the whole event. Was just completely drunk to the point where I couldn't really remember it in the morning, apart from those kind of vague details. And there'd been a few things that had happened leading up to that, where she had been making me a lot more aware than I was that my behaviour was causing an issue, and that I would always respond with like, yeah, but I've got loads of mates. They all really like me for who I am. Like, it's who I am. Like, who cares, sort of thing. That's just how I am, and deal with it. And then after that happened, there was kind of a real threat to the relationship, and it was like, look, you're going to have to sort this out, or I can't be with you. And it's not completely down to Days for making me kind of see the error of my ways, but it took that to kind of go, oh God, I've really, really embarrassed myself here. And it's because I was angry, and because I'd let kind of drink spill over into it. What often happens with me is that if I'm really kind of overexcited about something, like you said, it's like anger and happiness kind of sometimes exist on the same plane, as particularly excitement, I think. For instance, like if there's a big football match on, so say it's the World Cup or something, England are playing in a big game, and it's like we're going to have a big session, and it's like it starts off at this real level of overexcitement, and then the more I kind of drink and get into it, and alcohol isn't the problem here. I was angry without alcohol or with alcohol, so it wasn't a case of I need to stop drinking. It was a case of I need to be happy when I'm sober in order to not be angry when I'm drunk, and that overexcitement just tended to spill over into like arguments, which then end in either fights or violence or aggression in some way. So it kind of took that moment at the charity ball to kind of realise, oh dear, I need to sort this out, and so then kind of went to sort out some counselling, some anger management counselling, and from there started kind of working backwards and going, oh yeah, no, this has been a problem for a while.
And I think that's fascinating, because I think the level of self-awareness you were able to show with support from your from your partner allowed you to sort of go on that path. I wonder how many sort of men in particular are out there with those same thoughts and feelings, but haven't had that sort of check, that moment where they suddenly go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe there's something that's going on here. When you started talking about the counselling, were you expecting to sort of look backwards? Were you expecting to sort of go and try and find something from the past? And what was that exploration like, if you like?
Yeah, I think I was expecting that. I think I was quite aware of what therapy is and what counselling is. And I knew that it would be, addressing family issues and going back to kind of explore those things. I mean, what was great about it is that she gave me some great, just quick exercises. She was like, right, it's your first session. Let me just give you some exercises. So if you because you're not going to get to peaceful in an hour. So let me give you some breathing exercises. Let me give you some techniques just to, if you get in this if you feel yourself getting angry, take yourself away to the toilet or whatever, and you use these techniques. So that was brilliant to just start off. And then it was kind of the questions of, what had happened recently, what had brought me to her. And then I guess it's like you just start talking about things that have happened, relationships with parents, and where it was just all about getting to the root cause of where it all started. And once I unlocked that, there was kind of a real breakthrough there, which was like just so liberating of like, wow, I understand now why I am how I am. And once you understand that, you can accept it and you can forgive yourself. I think that's really, really important, that you go, right, I know why I'm like this now. I forgive myself for everything I've done so far because it all makes sense. And now I've got to tackle it. And, it's about just not being too hard on yourself. So that exploration, it's hard. I mean, I don't know if have you done any therapy yourself, Mick?
No, I haven't. And actually, I was going to ask you about that, because I think in terms of that sort of like moment, and I won't ask you specifically if it's a personal thing for yourself. But
no, it's in the show, so I'm happy to say.
Okay, well, let's not do too many spoilers. For the
no,
show.
No, true.
But I almost think like from a let's liken it to something in the movies. Like,
yeah,
there's like Spider-Man. It's his uncle gets killed, and did he do enough, and was he mean to him? Or in Batman, he falls down a well, and he all these bats fly in his face, and that's like a moment. But like, does it have to be something as eventful as that? Do you think, or can it be something not necessarily mundane, but almost just a moment? Even if it wasn't a malicious moment, or if you didn't view it that way at the time, something that could be a small sort of like bump in the road that might just send you off in a slightly different route.
Yeah, I think possibly. I mean, that's kind of your butterfly effect theory in a way, isn't it? But not something random, perhaps. But yeah, I guess for a lot of people and a lot of men, it's a culmination of things. It's a build-up of things, isn't it? Which leads to either a moment of real anger, or it leads to a mental breakdown, or something like that. And it's like you can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but it's a culmination. And I guess discovering what that culmination is just as important as maybe for my situation, the discovery of that event and what happened there then led on to me to and then loads of other things happened as well, which didn't help. So I guess there's not always a huge event. I mean, quite often it probably is. I mean, quite often it starts from a traumatic event perhaps, but you're absolutely right. It could just be small things, which then build to a kind of release, I guess.
And you mentioned the show. Let's talk about Your Mam, which is going on UK tour this very month. Let's make it absolutely clear. It's an acronym for Young Man's Angry Movements. And, you put yourself on stage with this one. It's had a strong run in Liverpool, and now you're going to be traveling nationwide. You're also going to be doing these workshops alongside. I thought this was really an interesting idea, that you've got a show which raises the issues, but also creates a space to have some of these conversations as well. You obviously felt that that was an important part of the show.
Yeah, it was part of the original idea. Really, was I think having an angle or having a message is really, really important with creative work. I think particularly with theatre, it's like you want the audience to be going home with something, to maybe change their perspective or their lives in a very small way. And I think that's what the best art does. And kind of when I was writing it, I thought about other young men and aiming at young men and just saying to them, look, I caught it at age 26. If I'd have caught it at 16, although I'm very happy with how my life's gone, and I managed to compartmentalize certain aspects to the professional me was probably a lot different to the social me, but then sometimes it would spill over and it would cross, and I think it has affected me professionally in certain instances. I think particularly with my early career. So it's just about saying to these young men, look, if you feel you've got some issues, and every young man will have some anger, catch it early, and then trust me, your life is going to be a lot better. You're going to have more success in all aspects, in your relationships, in your work life, in all of those things are going to be much, much better if you can not get rid of anger, because you can't get rid of anger, but just harnessing it, controlling it, using it in the right way, and becoming a master of that feeling. So the workshops are kind of designed to help with that. I mean, we're working with a brilliant company who specialize in kind of creative workshops and things like that. So they're running the workshops, and I'll be there as well to aid and assist. So it's alongside the show. During this engagement week we've got in Lancashire, which I think is going to be even more rewarding than performing it for the general public.
Can I ask you about, and I think you touched on this in terms of your own sort of journey, if you like, that you said, oh, this is just me, this is just how I am, and then you learned that actually your anger was actually something else. And I just wondered whether or not that's the most difficult step in this, that someone recognizing that, and we get this when we talk about things like depression on the program, that and this was my story sort of growing up. I just presumed that was how I was, that was the person that I was. It wasn't that there was something else going on, that there was something which I could actually sort of pop into a box with a label and actually look at reasons for it almost in front of me. I just thought that's how I am, that's just my role within, that's how my role within this world will play out, that I'll just be unhappy or unsatisfied or unfeeling towards the whole sort of process, not realizing that it was actually a thing which had a label, which had a name, which you could have taken out, you could have looked at, you could have found a whole host of different things to do. But it's quite a big leap for someone to do that, who just thinks, well, I'm just angry, like I'm just an angry person, this is just how I respond. That you can say to him, but you don't have, that doesn't have to be you, that's not a defining part of you. It may have defined some of the journey you've been on, but it doesn't have to define you as a person, and you don't have to accept it as the norm. And I wonder if that's just, we don't grow up in a world where we can learn those things about ourselves, or learn that the sum of our experiences can actually be compartmentalized, separated, and actually analyzed in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, maybe there should be kind of more education on. I think we were having a conversation the other week, myself and my fiance, because we just had a son, and he's 5.5 months old now, and she was saying, which qualities would you say are most important? Like, would you tell Asa are the most important qualities? And self-awareness for me was like up there with like number one. And I think encouraging self-awareness, self-reflection from an early age, to constantly kind of question, maybe without kind of without judgment, or maybe not even questioning, but just constantly observing how you feel and sitting in those feelings and going, okay, that's fine. Okay, I feel like that at the moment. I'm just going to sit in that for a bit, And if you start sitting in that, and if you start observing those feelings, the feeling will then pass. Like feelings come and go. And you know, I'm not speaking about kind of, you know, mental illness, because those are kind of feelings that you just cannot, you cannot control at certain points. You maybe, you know, need medication, etc., etc. But I mean, just kind of general everyday life feelings that might crop up. That they do come and go, and I guess it's just about like teaching that from an early age to go, look, just observe how you're feeling, write down how you're feeling, maybe keep a diary, or it's just you've got to, if you're not feeling right, you have to tackle it. And it's amazing how often we don't care for ourselves first. You know, it's that old saying, isn't it? Sort your own, get your own house in order first, and then sort everything else out. And I think it's vitally, vitally important to sort out your own happiness first and foremost, and then that will have a knock-on effect everywhere else. But how do we do that? What do you think?
So I've mentioned this in the podcast before, so forgive listeners who are hearing this again. So what I do, so I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old now.
Lovely.
So what I do is exactly as you've described. We have this marks out of 10 thing. So we say, what are your marks out of 10 today?
Nice.
It's a 7 out of 10, or it's a 9 out of 10, and it's a 9 out of 10 because there's, you know, a friend who was off ill has come back into school, or it's a 4 out of 10 because you didn't get to play with your friend, or whatever it is. And as much as anything, it doesn't necessarily matter what it is at that point. But if my daughter every day was coming home from school saying it was a 4 or a 4 or a 5 or a 3, you can then kind of go, well, why do you feel? Why is it? What do we need to do to make it a 5, or how can we make it a 6? Almost to learn that the fact that there is a flow of emotion that you will be experiencing. And some days you'll feel like that, but the next days you'll feel like the other. And if you can almost learn to sort of check that gauge on a daily basis, and I mean, it is a daily basis thing, it allows you to go, actually, I feel like a 7 today, but why do I feel like that? Didn't sleep last night, drank too much coffee yesterday, drank too much yesterday, worried about a project that I've got going on at work or at school or whatever it would be. Knowing that, okay, right, I at least I know the reasons for that, which allows you to then sort of, when you get an 8 or a 9, think, right, well, why do I feel good? Oh, it was because I went for a run before, because I got some great feedback on something. And you could almost then apply that when you feel like a 6. Maybe you go for a run because you knew that last time you went for a run, it bumped you up to an 8. And I think that's one of the things which how do you define yourself as a person, as a human being? We do it based on just everything that we've ever got put into a particular moment. But I think we could be a little bit more nuanced to that, can't we? In terms of everything, you know, as a person, you can only be everything you've ever experienced and everything you've ever learned, and then placed into a moment and expected to utilize every best skill you've got to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
And not at that moment utilize anything that's negative or that you're worried about, and then you will be judged on your reaction in that particular moment. That's quite a strange set of rules and circumstances that we place on ourselves, or that we then. I spoke to someone just a few weeks ago, you know, who was talking about when her mum died of cancer, and she says, I will never ever judge anyone based on how they react in their worst moment of their lives. And you think, oh, that's absolutely. That again, when we go to the superhero narrative, the superhero at the darkest time is the most heroic. Actually, at our darkest times, we're at our worst. Of course, we're not going to be any use to anyone. We're struggling a lot. We're just trying to get through to the end of each and every day, if you like. And I think that self-awareness, that moment to sort of gauge yourself and kind of go, okay, well, here's where I am at the moment, and here's where I want to get to. I guess the thing is, how do we teach those skills that allow someone to get to that point? And how do we instill that in the way that you instill you cross when the green man appears on the lights, that you don't talk to strangers, that you know, look both ways when you're crossing the road? They're the sorts of skills we teach kids, and we all remember it into adulthood. We need that other stuff to move us into adulthood as well, I'm guessing. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's some, such brilliant points there and techniques, you know, and I think that scale is great, because although you're reducing feelings to kind of a scale of 1 to 10, what you're at, it might feel reductive, but actually it's more specific. Because I think if you just ask a 7-year-old how they're feeling, they're not going to be able to articulate that in a way that a scale of 1 to 10 does. And I think even as an adult, that is something that's tangible and specific. It's like, absolutely, how can I get up to an 8? How can I get up to a 9? Why am I at a 6? Instead of kind of just going, well, I feel all right. I feel okay today. And it's like, well, why don't you feel brilliant today? Why don't you feel great today? Can you push yourself to get to that level? So I think it's vitally, vitally important that we have these conversations and we go, if you're doing that with your kids, I think it's a great idea. I think that's what I'll do with my son. So already you've put that on to me. So it's like, well, great, I'm inspired by that. You've passed that on. I'll pass it on to somebody else who's having kids. And hopefully, we can slowly but surely, as the next generation comes through, it's like, well, there might just be a few more men that don't suffer from anger and aggression and all of that kind of thing.
Can I ask you, in terms of anger, this idea that you anger management, that you manage the anger, that you level it to neutral, if you like. If you take the anger and you sort of pull the sand on it, pull the sand on the flame, if you like. Is there an opportunity, do you think, within that space to not just sort of not feel angry, but to feel something else, to allow a different emotion in, to almost thrive within a moment rather than feel angry within a moment? Do you think that's within that sort of remit of anger?
As in kind of like, adjusting the feeling of anger to something else?
Yeah. To sort of rather than just to feel angry and then not to feel angry about something. It's to almost like deny yourself an emotional outlay, if you like. But to actually, I think there's a sense that if you control it to a point where it just goes down to 0, if you like, does it manifest in a slightly different way? Can it manifest in a positive way? So that, if you are excited about a moment and you're having a great time with your friends and you're having a few drinks, that rather than just thinking, right, I just need to stop this now, you can actually take it in a slightly different path. I just wanted to know if you felt like that was maybe part of a journey that you could be on.
I think possibly, I guess that's a really, really good question, and I think it's tricky to be able to kind of, it's all about catching it. It's all about that self-awareness and observing yourself before it gets to a certain point. And again, it's not about stopping drinking and going home and just, cutting it out there. But perhaps there's an instance where you need to go away for a few minutes, calm yourself down, come back. But then I guess that's still at a point of neutrality, isn't it? And I think the positive feelings come in when you look back on the moment and you go, I didn't allow myself to get upset there. And actually I turned it into something better and different. And perhaps it's a case of if it's somebody else that's made you upset, it's about learning how to deal with that without getting angry at them. It's about going, hold on a minute, mate, that's quite upsetting, and having the confidence to do that. I think particularly with men, it's such a safe way to be emotional. Anger is such a kind of, particularly like, if you're watching football or you're watching sport, it's okay it's perfectly fine for grown men to scream murder at these players, because they're really angry at the performance. Yeah, it's, and also it almost becomes acceptable to cry, doesn't it, when you're watching sport, which is a different thing, but also very interesting. So it's about making other emotions acceptable, instead of it always being anger. It's more acceptable to have a go at somebody if they've upset you than it is to kind of take them to one side and go, look, mate, you're really upsetting me here.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, because you try and place yourself within those arguments where just before it kicks off, to say to somebody, say, look, I can see this is an issue you're really passionate about, and we're obviously not going to agree on this. But actually, do you see the point I'm making about X, Y? I take your point about this. Do you see? And actually, then it becomes more of a, yeah, okay. it becomes like the politicians who somehow manage to get on despite the fact that they completely disagree. Because you see things like in the House of Commons where you think this is just going to turn into like a slanging match.
Yeah.
And you think actually, but a lot of them often get to the point where they suddenly go, okay, we're obviously not going to agree, but can we find a little bit of ground, and at least that I guess to a certain extent that allows whatever that relationship is to at least then continue forward. Even if it doesn't progress beyond saying goodbye to somebody in the pub and never seeing them again.
Yeah,
it at least creates that pathway, and then I guess it might also create a pathway that you can follow again in the future, if you like. So you think, well, actually, I completely disagree with this person. They're absolute, barn pots talking about X, Y, or Z. But I know that actually I can agree to disagree, and we can just walk away, not holding hands, but we can just, walk off in separate directions and leave it at that particular point.
Yeah, definitely. It's about picking your battles as well. It's going, well, hold on. Is it going to benefit me to debate this point with this particular person, or is it just going to upset me? And could it spill over into something where that isn't healthy? There was something on a family event recently, and there's a family member who can be a little bit difficult. Has certain views on climate change and certain views on quite old school kind of right wing views, which each to their own, up to you. But it's either with that person, it's all about preparation for me. It's like, I know I'm going to see this person, and if they say something, either ignore it or just say like, yeah, no, I get that. And the day and seeing them went so much better because I already had that in my head, and they didn't say anything too controversial at all. I mean, it was something about they said something about theatre and the way that they changed when people update the classics, like when contemporary theatre goes. I don't think he was talking about Shakespeare, but it was maybe a musical where it was like, right. Just stick to the old way, and I don't know why they do that. It may have been like an all-female cast or something like that. So you're bordering on this kind of, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. But I just sat there and I had my son in my arms. I was just like, yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I get that. And then that's it. It's like, well, I didn't need to challenge that. Like, I'm not going to change his mind. He's like 65 years old. So I'm not just go with it. And I think picking your battles is really, really important as well.
Absolutely. The Your Mam show is on a UK tour. Just tell us about just the format, if you like, about what's actually happening up on stage.
Well, yes. So it's just me. It's a solo show. And it's as we've spoken about, it's about my experiences with anger and being a man and the pressures of that society kind of puts on you to behave in a certain way, and other men kind of that do as well, and about various relationships with other men, particularly my dad, and granddad a little bit as well, and basically how it all came to a head, like what I've spoken about. And I basically asked the audience to join me on this journey to help me find something resembling peace. And there's a mixture of kind of mediums in there. There's rap, there's music, it's mainly spoken word, there's poetry, there's monologue, there's emails that I read out. So it kind of takes on different forms, and it hopefully kind of provides a sort of blueprint to tackle your own anger problems. It's amazing how many men have come up to me afterwards and said, that was my life up there, or I really resonated with that part, or I really resonated with that part. So I think it has got that universal, despite it being a very personal story, it's relevant because I think we all, as men, go through very, very similar things when we're growing up.
At the moments where you explore the anger, the outbursts, if you like, how do the audience respond? Because as human beings, when we see anger, we're naturally, we try and take a step away from it. It makes us feel uncomfortable. But you're obviously doing that within an environment where people have come to see you represent that as well. So what's the room like at those moments?
Yes, it's good. I mean, it varies really. I think obviously, it's a show, and they, it might make some people smile, particularly if like I put the focus on them. Like it really is about addressing the audience throughout. They're kind of active participants in a way of, it's not audience participation, but in terms of like, I'm using them to help me through this journey. That's a big part of the show. It's like I need you to help me here, which is why it works as theatre, and why it was written for theatre. It's intimate. It's close. They're close to the action, and it's picking people out. But I mean, there's a bit of license to ad lib and things like that. I remember in the run at the Everyman, someone came in late, and I'd just finished like my first track, and I'm really kind of like hyped up and angry, and then they come in and sit down. I'm like, "Why are you late?" And they're like, "I'm sorry." And afterwards, I saw them. I was like, "I'm sorry about that, about picking you out. I was just in the moment, just like." And it's about showing them what I was like and what it. And what I could be like with people. It was very quick to anger and very quick to judge. So I guess the reactions are mixed. I mean, the main thing is that they seem to be fully engaged, yeah. and fully kind of committed to the story, which is ideal for theatre.
Absolutely. The UK tour is on now. We'll put a link in the podcast where people can find out about where you are and for tickets as well. Just mention those workshop sessions you mentioned in Lancashire as well, where people might be able to get involved.
So we're doing them. There's with a company called the Old Electric Sunshine Project, and we're performing. We're doing 3 performances. 2 at the old Electric in Blackpool, and 1 at Dukes Lancaster. So I think there's tickets available for that. And there'll be a mixture of like invited audience as well, young people. So I guess if you head to those venues' websites, there'll be more information on the workshops and things like that. But I think we've already kind of engaged certain youth groups and people like that can be involved. But I'm sure there's a way to get involved as well, if you're in the area and you want to come along.
Absolutely. And do people go, "Oh, you're the guy from Hollyoaks"? Is that the thing that people say, do you think, for young audiences?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I left January 2020, so it's been a good couple of years now. So I get recognised less and less. But yeah, and there's I reference it in the show that it was at a period of my life where I just got into Hollyoaks, and that's how I met my fiance. And so yeah, there's an element of that, and I think it's quite nice to surprise in a way. I think there's not everybody, of course, but there's a general kind of view of soap actors that perhaps they aren't quite as serious about art and creativity as other actors, and I think that's that's completely false. Some of the people I worked with on Hollyoaks, some of the most creative people I've ever met. So it's certainly not the view of everybody that's the case, but it's quite nice to kind of subvert that narrative in a way for someone to go in the audience, go, "Oh wow, this is a really kind of complex human being that really considers things in his life and how he is." It's certainly a far cry from the character that I played on Hollyoaks. He was kind of quite happy-go-lucky, carefree, funny. He was a very, very nice guy as well. So it's very different. So quite good for people to see.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's when your football stars or pop stars are sort of involved in this sort of world that people go, "Oh, maybe I can have this conversation because this is someone I know whose face I trust, and maybe I wouldn't expect them to have this conversation. So maybe this is something that I can engage with." And I think that's credit to you for the work you're doing and for putting your journey both up on stage, but having these sort of additional elements to it as well. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you speaking to us today on Mental Health Monday. Good luck with the tour, the workshops as well. We'll put a link, as I say, at the bottom of the podcast where people can find out more information about the tour and the tickets, and hopefully get involved in the program too.
Thanks so much, Mick. Really appreciate you having me on, and really appreciate the work that you've been doing with this for for so long now. You said this is episode 241, isn't it? You said, was that right? 231?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm feeling big pressure for what episode 250 is going to be.
Yeah, it's got to be a big one, that. It's got to be a big one. But no,
even bigger than this one.
Definitely.
Absolutely, even bigger. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.